Ken has an amazing background, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice in a 2-minute intro. He's been with Microsoft for 19 years, and more than half of that time, he played a key role in making Azure the multi-billion-dollar business it is today. And so he has great insight into sort of the platform, how it's evolved, where it's going, but also in working with customers like us and customers that are embracing the cloud, sort of understanding what were their business drivers and how the cloud is enabling those outcomes for those customers. So I'm going to try and tap into some of that knowledge. The other thing that's amazing about, can I talk about sort of?
Talk about anything you want. Just not my age, birth date, or political preferences. Other than that, you're good to go.
Well, being a guy in the software space, there's between your work and family, sometimes there's very little time you have for anything else. And what I was amazed to learn was Ken is like a certified wine expert. And I'm using that word because I can't even pronounce that word. How do you say that?
Sommelier.
Sommelier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try that.
It just means that I like wine. I like to drink wine. It's a hobby. Love to study it. It's fun. It kind of keeps balance between work and life, for sure.
Yeah, so if we have time, I'm going to ask him some wine questions, some fine wine questions. But let's start with Ken, anything you want to add with respect to your intro and what you do at Microsoft?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, it's been a fantastic ride. And when you say 19 years, it's almost embarrassing, right? Like saying you've been at a company for 19 years, especially in the technology industry, because a lot of folks transition, 3 or 4 or 5 years, and they're off to something new. Microsoft's given me a lot of opportunity, in different roles. Like you said, a lot of Azure-based roles. But from a career perspective, it's been a fantastic learning experience. I live in office out of the San Francisco Bay Area, so I'm not in Seattle. That brings me closer to Silicon Valley and really see a lot of cutting edge technologies, early stage adoption, a lot of digital natives coming up out of the ground, late stage startups, et cetera. So fantastic journey for sure.
So let's start with sort of what you see with your clients, which is, what are the principles that help modern businesses thrive?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think that, as I think about that and we think about just even kind of recent history, right? It's how do companies stay relevant, right? And, again, going back to Sean's presentation as an example, I mean, think about the innovation, right? Where you are today with iManage Work 10, right, versus where you were just 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. There's massive change, massive innovation there. So I think that taking advantage of digital transformation, thinking about new ways to tap revenue streams, new business models, new ways to drive customer adoption, top line revenue, looking at new ways to interact with customers and employees, having the ability to consume massive amounts of data and do something meaningful with it. I think all of those things really help companies stay relevant and really understanding what consumers want. I think about kind of this concept that we have today with everything as a service, right? You think about like DoorDash, Peloton, Uber, Snap. Those types of companies didn't exist probably 5 years ago. And now it's just like a way of life for everyone, right? So I think that thinking creatively, innovating, not being afraid to take risks, fail fast. Public cloud gives you the ability to fail fast. I think that's key, right? Let's try something new and different. Let's see if we get traction. Let's see if our customers like it. If they do, great. We could scale out rapidly. We could leverage public cloud on a global basis. If not, we didn't have to buy the infrastructure. We didn't buy a new data center to try that, right? We had the ability to fail fast. So I think a lot of it is just risk taking.
And how do you see cloud computing enabling modern businesses to be more nimble and to compete more effectively?
I mean, I think it goes back to kind of the investments Microsoft is making as an example, right? We have a global infrastructure. We're building data centers all over the world. We're investing literally billions of dollars in security, which is of key importance, right? You see, I mean, even in this industry, right? The folks that are in this room today, thinking about security, thinking about resiliency, thinking about replication, right? I think all of the investments that we're making allow customers to leverage new and different digital technologies to take share and get ahead. We see a lot of customers today building on Azure, spinning up new and different business models. We don't have strategic partnerships like we have with iManage with all of them. I think that what's super unique about our partnership, for example, Neil, is that we've got joint roadmap, right? We're doing joint planning. There's a lot of really good conversations happening around how we can integrate even deeper. And that's really not for iManage or for Microsoft. It's for your end customers and our end customers, right? It aligns back to Microsoft's vision and our charter, right? We want to make people more productive.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk in that vein about how Microsoft has embraced open source? What was that conversation like? If you can give us sort of an under the hood.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll tell you this. So I've been at Microsoft, like you said, about 19 years now. And, in the early days, in full transparency, Linux was perceived as just like the devil, right? Like, we were very focused on Microsoft technologies, not focused on open source. I think that, really with Satya coming on board, that's when I saw the most critical changes. We are investing massively in open source technologies. And it's always interesting for people to hear this, but we spin up more Linux VMs than Windows VMs. I don't know if you know that, but it speaks to the fact that there's more Linux running on Azure than Windows. Kubernetes is another really good example, open source technology. I know that iManage has done a lot of work with Kubernetes, and you've actually influenced our roadmap. So we appreciate all the time you've spent with our developers to make that happen. I look at it this way, right? We are a service provider. Bring it, we'll run it. At the end of the day, we want to create the best experience for our customers. And if they want to run open source technologies on our platform, that's great. You think about Microsoft's acquisition of GitHub a few years ago. I think we paid $7.5 billion for GitHub, public information. But that's really, largely that's focused on all open source technologies, right? And enabling developers. So, I love it because, again, I live in Silicon Valley, and most of the customers that we work with, especially the ones that are coming up out of the ground, are really focused on running open source technologies on Azure. The other thing, too, that I would say that's another interesting facet that's somewhat connected to that, again, it goes back to bringing the best experience for our customers, is that, it's no secret. We're making massive investments in Synapse, for example, right, which is really our data platform. But yet we partner with and find great ways to partner with companies like Snowflake or Teradata that could be perceived, they are perceived as competitors in some ways because there is crossover. But we also recognize the fact that we've got customers today that would prefer to run Snowflake for a variety of reasons, right? So it's almost like the open source conversation where, we're all about customer preference. Like I said, bring it, we'll run it.
Yeah, it certainly helped us significantly because there is a lot of open source tech that's out there that can add value to our end customer. And the fact that we can run it seamlessly and effectively in Azure, it doesn't become a choice for us. We can have the best of both worlds.
Right, and I think that that's great for iManage and what you're doing, your roadmap, your innovation. But at the end of the day, if you are enabling more productivity for the folks sitting in this room, as an example, that's really the win, right? It's great that you could do it, and we've taken the handcuffs off, so to speak. But again, it goes back to aligning, back to Microsoft's vision, right? Which is giving people the ability to do more.
And can you talk to how Azure is enabling ISVs, independent software vendors like iManage, to deliver the superior end user experiences that were not easy to deliver before?
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to really working with ISVs like iManage that understand specific markets and verticals. So look, we rely on your feedback to say that, there are customers that want us to work together. In fact, I think that's how our companies were originally introduced. There were customers of iManage, there were customers of Microsoft saying that you guys should get together. I felt like someone was trying to set us up on a blind date, kind of like, you guys should talk. And, here we are down the road and, at the altar, right? But in all seriousness, I think that, we're never going to build, I shouldn't say never. Today we're not building vertical solutions. We rely on ISVs to help us understand what the market wants, and then we build the foundation and plumbing to bring those solutions forward. I think part of it is developing a strategic relationship like Microsoft has with iManage, where you are bringing us real-time feedback. We are developing joint roadmaps. We're giving you access to Microsoft platforms like Office 365, Outlook for email, Teams, et cetera, that allows you to create these end user experiences like Sean was demoing basically that benefit all the folks in the room. I will tell you that earlier this year, and Neil, you're aware of this, but just for the rest of the folks in the room, we actually spun up a brand new vertical, a national vertical called Software and Digital Platforms. The focus there is essentially all around ISVs. So we are developing deep subject matter expertise specific to ISVs, developing thought leadership, investing heavily in cloud essentially for the benefit of ISVs to build on top of Azure, but also to build on top of Office 365, Teams, et cetera, to integrate that seamless experience that we just saw a few minutes ago. So we recognize the fact that ISVs are growing more rapidly than any other industry right now, and we want to do whatever we can to empower ISVs to drive success. At the end of the day, if we provide that foundation, you win, you recruit more customers onto your platform, we see more goodness as well because there's more adoption of our technology. So we want to be there. The last thing I'll say too, and I feel compelled to say this, is that we don't have a history of saying, okay, well, this sounds like a really interesting opportunity. We're going to create our own iManage type solution, right? We want to empower ISVs, not compete with ISVs. And I think that if you look at some of our competitors in full transparency, there's been some friction created, like in the retail vertical, without naming names, or the pharmaceutical vertical, et cetera, where ISVs have built on competitive platforms, but then that platform provider has kind of turned back and said, oh, that's an interesting market opportunity. We're going to get in that space. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know if that helps, but
no, that's helpful. We can switch, borrowing Sean's term, switch gears a little bit and talk about what you guys are doing in Azure. Let's start with security. I know Microsoft spends billions with a B on security. What's can you speak a little to some of the drivers are obvious, but what's can you speak a little to what you're doing in security?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that, as a company, we're very focused on security, just kind of this whole concept of zero trust, not only on Azure, of course, but across all of our platforms and all of our technology. I was at an internal meeting recently, and I was listening to some folks from a product group that were focused on security solutions. And it's mind-blowing to me that we literally collect billions, with a B again, of signals every day across the globe, and use AI and ML and a bunch of different types of intelligence to determine like threats and threat level. And again, I mean, that's a massive investment that Microsoft is making that our partners like iManage and your end customers naturally get downstream, right? So we recognize that security threats are becoming more and more and more prominent every day, and we're continuing to invest heavily. The good news is that, across our platform, that those security provisions are embedded, right? So, you spin up an Azure VM, it's secure, right? We've got partners that are in our marketplace today, like, Palo Alto Networks of the world, and other partners that are building firewalls and other assets that our customers can also leverage. But I'll tell you that, like, every conversation that I'm involved in today, whether it's Azure, O365, business applications, one of the key points that is always brought up is the investments we're making in security. It's top of mind for Microsoft for sure.
And through the pandemic, I'm assuming you guys have seen a massive increase in cloud adoption. Can you characterize that for this audience? How big is cloud?
Yeah, I mean, so our cloud business has been growing dramatically year over year. If you look back at any financial data, right? When we talk about cloud at Microsoft, we don't break out Azure specifically. It's what we refer to as intelligent cloud, which is essentially O365 Azure and any cloud solutions. I will tell you that when the pandemic started, to your point, I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head. If I knew you were going to ask this question, I would have looked up the numbers first. But our team's adoption, I mean, it went up by literally like 10,000x almost overnight because we immediately turned into a virtual environment. The good news was, and there was a ton of internal data on this, that we were able to scale out very rapidly and never really had a hiccup with kind of flipping to this virtual world overnight, right? And it's not only just the flip to the virtual world, but I think it's also increasing productivity, creating hybrid work environments, not creating, but essentially helping our customers create hybrid work environments where people can still, essentially be very productive. Productivity is key. So I think that Teams is a function of that. O365 is a function of that. Azure is clearly a function of that, right? And we're continuing to see traction there. The other thing too, that's kind of beautiful about this is that the pandemic forced a lot of that creativity that I spoke about at the onset of our conversation. People were forced to think differently about hybrid work environments. They were forced to think differently about how they interact with their customers and employees. So we saw a ton of cloud adoption. Our Azure usage went up far more significantly than it had in years past, again, just because the adoption had to take place. So for me, that was just fascinating to watch. I don't think it's anything that anyone could have ever predicted, but I still think that we're seeing the benefits of that because people now realize how quickly you can innovate, right? How quickly you can turn a corner, and as a result of that, we're seeing more and more traction across the board with all of our cloud solutions.
Yeah, one of the things that we've noticed, simply as being an ISV, is that there's more clarity about sort of where Microsoft is adding value in the stack versus someone like us. And I hope that clarity is coming out, to you folks too. And it's enabled us to partner more effectively in places that perhaps we were not before. A great example is some of the stuff that Sean showed. What we're doing with co-authoring, for example, required a tremendous amount of cooperation from Microsoft with their product teams to get to the level of seamlessness, where it's almost invisible, where Office 365 ends and where the iManage experience begins. And we are, I'd say, super excited about that level of engagement with how Microsoft is thinking about the world right now.
Yeah, the co-authoring experience is actually so significant because that's not something that we've opened up for all partners, right? I think it goes back to the fact that we are strategic partners. There have been huge investments on both sides and just a ton of trust. I think at the end of the day, creating that seamless user experience, similar to some of what Sean showed, right? It creates a much better user experience for everyone sitting in this room. It goes back again. I've said this a few times, but back to Microsoft's mission, right? We want to enable others to do more with our technology, and I think that having that vision of ultimately what you wanted to create, forming this strategic partnership, Microsoft opening doors to strategic assets that we hadn't done previously, but seeing the output, seeing how workflows can be optimized it's incredible. It's super, super, super cool to see.
Yeah, and it certainly gives us the ability to be far more impactful to the end customer. If we can talk a little bit about going back to Azure and how we're utilizing Azure. I'm pretty sure that you've got customers that do it in many different ways. Some of them that are utilizing it simply as infrastructure, and some like us that are utilizing it like a platform. Mm-hmm. And you can achieve a lot more if you're utilizing like a platform because you're using the infrastructure plus you're using some of the software services that you guys provide. Can you talk a little bit about your, how you compare those two, and how do you see ISVs like us utilizing Azure in sort of more advanced ways?
Yeah, and that I think it goes back to one of the primary reasons why we created this national vertical that I mentioned. I think that several years ago, probably back in like 2017-ish, the initial inclination was like, let's just lift and shift out of our data center, right? Let's just take the infrastructure that we're paying for in this data center, sell the data center, stop leasing it, and move into public cloud. And it was just purely an infrastructure play. I think what we're seeing ISVs now do, as an example, is take advantage of services, right? Moving from IaaS to PaaS to serverless, taking advantage of different facets of the Azure platform to drive more, whether it is using like Synapse, as I mentioned before, for data and AI, machine learning, those types of opportunities. It could be leveraging a CDN network just to drive kind of more of a global presence with content. Those advancements, I think, are critical because it allows us to actually build features and engineer our roadmap aligned to what your customers want, right? By taking advantage of those unique services. It's not just lift and shift, running compute, networking, and storage. It's how do we build this seamless story, especially when you're incorporating other Microsoft assets like O365. That's where it becomes real interesting for us, and that's where the true digital transformation happens. I mean, let's face it, like digital transformation isn't moving out of a data center into public cloud. Digital transformation is leveraging cloud technologies to change the way we interact with customers, the way we create new and different workflows, the way we identify new revenue streams, the way that we consume data to look at consumer trends, and then do target marketing based on that. I mean, there's a ton there, but that's all through leveraging advanced services.
Yeah, and that's a key point, Ken. An example that I like to cite often is, I know that there's a ton of investment that Microsoft has made into connectivity between your data centers across the globe. Okay, for example, between New York and London, and what that's enabled us to do is to deliver an experience where you can literally search the globe in 3 seconds.
That's amazing. Yeah. But on top of that, though, Neil, it's like when you're pushing data from one country to another, I mean, we are the ones then that are worried about data residency, where the data resides, data sovereignty, all of those types of things, right? Like we've taken some of that worry away, I hope, from you as you think about how to build those applications, because it's like we hear this from all of our customers. We understand there are regulations, there are laws, so we've got to be focused on that. I mean, the other thing too, just another kind of point to this conversation is SLA, right? You need stability, you need resiliency, you need redundancy. Microsoft is on the hook for all of that, right? Like we are essentially making guarantees back to iManage that this platform that everyone in this room is using is going to, be up and running. The uptime is going to, meet or exceed your metrics. Again, so regardless of where you are in the world, you've got hopefully an always-on situation, and you're not dealing with downtime issues and wondering what's going on, because there is redundancy. If there's a challenge in one data center, boom, you move that workload to another data center.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the amount of engineering that we've had to put into some of those infrastructure elements has been significantly reduced because you're doing it at a much larger scale,
right? And
putting more engineers than we could ever imagine on those problems.
Right, and the end user experience. I mean, transparently, there probably aren't or weren't a lot of folks in this room that knew that iManage was built on top of Azure, right? They're just looking at, iManage work, and that's the user interface. No one really cares about where it's running as long as it's up and running and the uptime is there, right? But again, I think because of our strategic partnership, we've been able to do a lot more together. The phrase that I like to use, and I think it works well here, is 1 + 1 is 11, right? Like taking, your customer base, the features that you've been able to, articulate back to Microsoft, us developing this strategic partnership, it's created a much bigger win.
Let's talk in the few minutes we've got remaining about sort of what's coming up in the future. Where do you see Microsoft investing and innovating in improving the Azure platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm literally blown away every time I get, an email update or I sit in a meeting with engineers, the amount of investment that's taking place, right? I think the platform is going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to take share. There's a ton of innovation happening, like I said earlier, specific to ISVs. I will tell you, though, outside of this conversation, we're investing heavily in other, industry-related clouds, healthcare, financial services, et cetera. So there are massive investments happening there. I think that you will also see innovation happening around different assets that Microsoft has, whether it's deeper integration with GitHub, deeper integration with O365, deeper integration with Teams. We want to bring all of that together, so there's a ton of investment happening there. And then I think when like I said earlier, moving from IaaS to PaaS, serverless, making open source even more readily available than it is today, all of that is important. I also think too that we've done some interesting acquisitions, and we'll continue to integrate those acquisitions into the Azure platform. I think we'll also see, probably more first-party services move into the Azure platform. Databricks is a great example. Databricks is a very strong partner of ours. They're a first-party service on Azure, so if a developer wanted to, they could, literally light up Azure today and start using Databricks, 30 seconds later. So I think you'll see more of that, but the innovation is literally mind-blowing.
What does the iManage partnership mean to Microsoft? And what do you want it to mean to iManage customers?
Yeah, the iManage partnership to Microsoft is extremely important and super strategic. I will tell you, everyone in this room, that the level of partnership that we have with iManage, we have with very few ISVs today. We work with a ton of ISVs. They are all partners to us, but the conversations around joint roadmap, joint planning, features, integration with other Microsoft assets, there are very, very few partners across the world that have that level of integration with Microsoft. So thank you for that. It's two-way, right? We get a lot out of the partnership as well. The second part of it really is the ability to take the feedback that you provide from your customers from this specific vertical to help us create a better user experience. At the end of the day, we want more adoption on our platform, but it's not just about spinning meters on Azure. It's about creating the best user experience that we can create together. So it's super important for me to ensure this partnership is successful. It's super important to Microsoft. And at the end of the day, like I said, 1 + 1 is 11. We want to create more for everyone sitting in this room.
Yeah, I agree, Ken. I've been in this sort of industry for 20 plus years, and I think this partnership is, I hate using the word transformational, but I think this is one that has the potential to be transformational for our customers because of sort of the span of what both organizations do. So we appreciate the partnership very much, and I'm sure our customers appreciate it too. Yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome.